that it is being recorded. I also want to let you know that this is a closed meeting meant for local business leaders and chamber members. It is not open to the press. So if you are a member of the press and would like to contact us separately, we'd be more than happy to talk with you. You can reach me at melissa@wcareachamber.org, or feel free to call our office. So at this time, if you are a member of the press, we ask that you hang up. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. And again, Senator, thank you so much for the time that you've given us today. I know you've been making your rounds, talking with lots of groups, answering a lot of the same kinds of questions. And we have had multitude of conversations with our chamber members here locally. And so I want to just start off and give you an opportunity to give us an overview of some of the things you've been working on, things that have been happening in Washington, and how they've been flowing out to the local businesses and community members. Oops, you are on mute. There we go.
I've done a lot of these, but I still will forget to unmute periodically. Thank you so much, Melissa, for your leadership. Thank you for having me on today. Thank you, Roxy, and all the others who have tuned in. I thought I'd lay the groundwork, as I have recently done when I talk with groups about passage of the CARES Act specifically, which is, I suspect, how we'll spend most of our time today, taking your questions and getting feedback related to some of these programs. But I thought I'd take you back to 2008, 2009. That was a different sort of economic crisis we were facing. You'll recall the financial crisis, many of you. In the run-up to that downturn, the economy was not humming along by any stretch. And therefore, you had a number of our businesses who were shoring up their balance sheets, they're paying off debts, maybe maintaining some liquid assets in reserve, preparing for a rainy day. In contrast, we have come off, until just weeks ago, the best economy arguably in 5 decades, with unemployment low, labor markets tight, a lot of optimism about the future by most business people, and therefore a lot of investment in property, plant, equipment, workforce development. So the ironic twist here, and an unfortunate fact, is when you go from a humming economy, a pandemic hits, and people have to shelter in place, and full stop, your economic activity stops, and sales are eliminated or significantly reduced. There's not a lot of cash to meet your payments, to keep people attached to your workforce, to pay your rent, to pay for utilities, mortgage payments, all the other, fixed costs that you have, or regular operating costs. And so the purpose of our response was to recognize this liquidity crunch, to respond very quickly and very boldly to it, and to ensure that we made our households, workers who can no longer go to work, whole, to ensure that those workers have a place to go back to business too, and that we make the businesses whole, and we provide a bridge to the back end of this virus. So we've come up with sort of an artificial series of lifelines to help maintain our vibrant free enterprise system, preparing for this recovery. Let's hope that the $100 billion we allocated towards medical equipment, including testing and all manner of other things, will allow us to staunch the virus. We're prepared to spend more, incidentally, on that front, whatever is necessary, because we have to deal with the root cause. But just about everything we'll discuss today is a function of that root cause, and the sooner we can get past it, the better. But in the meantime, you need to be able to navigate these programs to make these payments. So we began with a $7.7 billion health response package just to deal with some really near-term needs. We then moved to free testing, food assistance, and some emergency and sick leave for those either who had coronavirus symptoms or who were caring for a family member who had those symptoms. We certainly didn't want those people going to work or tempted to go into work, thus infecting others. And so we wanted to disincentivize that behavior. And then the last piece of this was the shock and awe portion, the $2.2 trillion package, the CARES Act, so-called Phase 3, the largest economic recovery package in American history. It was incredibly fiscally responsible when you think about the alternative, which was to put people on public assistance and really to decimate our businesses, which are ultimately the source of the revenue coming into our federal government. So we didn't have many other options, and you'd let us know that through a lot of phone calls on the front end of this. So I thank all of you for your counsel. The CARES Act, I'm going to quickly go through some categories, and because I know many of you are conversant in it, some may not be aware of, for example, the tax provisions, which I'll dive into. We stood up some tax credits, sick leave and FMLA refundable tax credit. We also created an employer retention credit. There's a deferral of payroll taxes that I know a number of you will be taking advantage of to offer more liquidity, deferring payroll tax payments on the employer side this year. And then 50% of those payments will have to be made the following tax year, another 50% of the tax payments by December 31st, 2022. We made some adjustments to corporate tax provisions. Examples include the qualified improvement property provisions of tax law, interest deduction limitations, net operating loss provisions, and alternative minimum tax provisions. Again, we can follow up on some of those things. I'm armed and ready with a tax counsel on the line here. Then the small business provisions, which is what we tend to get the most questions about, starting with the Paycheck Protection Program. This is a beefed up variant of the 7A Small Business Administration Loan Program. We chose to use this vehicle and this program because A, so many businesses and financial institutions were already participating in it or had some familiarity with it. You know, small businesses, those with 500 or fewer employees, are comfortable working with their local financial institutions, whether it's a credit union, a bank, or an online bank platform. The Treasury Secretary advised us, I think accurately, that would be the fastest way to get money into people's hands as well. The other small business provision that you hear a little less about is the Economic Disaster Loan Program. Unlike the Paycheck Protection Program, which offers a forgivable loan of up to $10 million, so long as that money is spent on payroll, utilities, rent, all the basic things I mentioned earlier, that portion is forgivable. The EIDL program allows you to receive a loan of up to $2 million. And we've gotten some clarification from SBA on that program, less than the Paycheck Protection Program so far. The last thing I'd bring up is our larger employers. They employ about half of the people in this country. That is those employers with 500 or more employees. And because of the size, because these companies tend to have their own internal HR departments or can hire the expertise to work with the Federal Reserve, we thought we'd take a different approach with these businesses. Thought it would be good business to come up with a fund. We call it our Economic Stabilization Fund at the Department of Treasury. And then the Federal Reserve will use those monies to provide loans, loan guarantees, or investments in particular sectors of the economy in particular businesses tailored towards those individual businesses. So there'd be a negotiation that goes on. Most small businesses, of course, the landscaping company with 12 employees, you don't want to have to negotiate with the Fed in order to get your money and meet payroll. So that's why there's differential treatment. So that's how we arrived at these different programs. We acted very quickly. 2008, 2009, it took roughly 4 months to get a stimulus package passed. We were able to stand up all the programs I just mentioned, with varying degrees of specificity and challenges within 3 weeks. And there continues to be rolling guidance providing greater clarity on a lot of these programs, which is why, for example, the Paycheck Protection Program has a high rate of uptake here in the state of Indiana, and we've benefited enormously. But it's also why you sort of get the sense, to use a metaphor here, it feels as though the SBA is building the race car in the course of the race, kind of rolled out the program and is still rolling out more guidance. That's accurate. And, I can't say they did everything perfectly, but when you take into account the speed with which we asked them to act, the fact that we didn't give them any additional staffing, I think they're doing the best they can. They've been responsive to our office and some of the constructive feedback we've carried to them based on your counsel. And I really want to thank, our business people and our financial institutions for their patience and working through all the frustrations, because, candidly, we've been a little frustrated too, not at anyone per se, but just, this has been a challenging environment for all of us to operate in. So thanks for this opportunity to maybe bring a little more clarity to some of these programs.
I appreciate you kind of highlighting and touching on each one of those. They were all on my list, and so you touched on every single one of them, which was very good. I want to start off with a little bit more on the economic impact loans. I know that originally those were rolled out with the intent of $10,000 being forgivable, and then it was kind of dialed back a couple days ago to say there were so many applicants, SBA realized they were going to run out of funds and hold it back to say, we're going to issue no more than $1,000 per FTE. So for instance, if you have 5 FTEs, you're actually now eligible for 5,000, not 10. Do you anticipate that if another round of funding flows, that the original applicants will get the full 10,000 or get the balance of that 10,000 later, or is it going to remain the way it is regardless?
A couple of thoughts on that. I'm not sure about whether the rules would change. I wouldn't bank on that. I will in a moment open it up for Ann to see if she has any visibility into that based on some of the recent guidance or her conversations with the SBA. I will clarify, it's my understanding that unlike the Paycheck Protection Program, which offers forgivability, the EIDL program does not. It issues outright loans, not grants. Now, you do have the ability to take existing EIDLs and refinance them into PPP loans, which are eligible for forgiveness. Okay, so it's very important that everyone listening and yourself knows that. So that would be the process that you'd have to go through to get forgivability. Based on my understanding, unless something has changed. And do you have, I can take follow-ups on that, Melissa, but I'll also let Ann chime in as it relates to the per capita or per employee limitation that was administratively placed there. And there will be replenishment of the PPP program. I have high confidence that that's going to happen. There's just, we can get into why it hasn't happened yet momentarily.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the EIDL program was allocated about $17 billion, and the requests were many multiples of that. So I think the SBA was looking for an administrable way to give people some relief, realizing that they couldn't give everyone $10,000. We haven't discussed kind of what modifications or what might be going on kind of going forward or in a future phase. So I don't have insight on that, but that's kind of where the program is now. I think they wanted to get everyone some relief, realizing they couldn't get everyone the full $10,000.
Okay. And that definitely is a loan, not a forgivable loan.
Right, but if you, as the senator noted, if you have a PPP, you refinance it into it. So it's part of that process when you apply with your bank.
Okay, great. Excellent. Another question in regard to the replenishment, Senator, is there's been some allusion to the fact that a wave of replenishment may take place prior to your reconvening in Washington. Do you anticipate that to happen?
I anticipated it was going to happen on Friday, last Friday. And then I anticipated we had a good chance of it happening on Monday. And the longer this sort of drags on, the more I question, unless some news is broken today about negotiations as it pertains to this. I think what's going to happen, unfortunately, here just to give everyone some very brief perspective about what is being debated. Everyone agrees that we need to replenish because the trend lines clearly show that the supply allocated for Paycheck Protection Program is going to pretty significantly outstrip the demand is going to outstrip supply, and so we're all in agreement that we need to be able to make sure that everyone who needs one gets one. The disagreement is about whether or not we fund some additional items that we all have sympathies for, things like additional monies for hospitals in conjunction with that. My own view is, why don't we go ahead and pass whatever we all agree on, and then these other areas, for example, like assistance to our healthcare providers, where again, I want to be very clear, I'm prepared to spend more money, but most of the money hasn't even gone out the door yet. It's not clear that the demand outstrips supply. You might start to sense that there's potentially some politics going on here, right? And so I'm prepared to, if people are about to shut the doors, I'm prepared to make some principled compromises or whatever. But I just, I also feel I need to be a good steward of the taxpayers' money, right? So I hope we can come together and just pass straight PPP and then pay for the other stuff as needed. That's the best answer I can give you. I think pressure is going to ratchet up as we inform more people about what's really going on to do just what I said. And so I'm hopeful that in, say, the next week or two, we'll get a replenishment. That in turn will lead to a reduction in a frenzy to get in line, right? Because there is understandable apprehension among people. Unless I can give you a 100% ironclad guarantee that there's going to be a replenishment, there's a rush to get this done. There's a lot of pressure on our financial institutions and businesses alike, as well as the SBA. So, yeah.
Great, thank you for that.
Yes.
I want to go ahead, and we've had some questions popping up in the chat box, and so I want to go ahead and give an opportunity for some questions. Roxy, do you want to present those?
Yeah, so the first question we had come in is from Stacia Vera Malay, and she wants to know if you have any feedback regarding Trey Hollingsworth's comments.
I haven't received any feedback.
And then Ron Oler, our council president, our city council president, says, thank you for the stimulus packages for individuals, business, and political subdivisions. Richmond's airport receives stimulus funds. Now the city will apply next week if council approves it on Monday. Does your office have access to see which cities have applied, and does your office have any influence? We will ask for 2 to 3 months of operating expenses to cover tax revenue shortfalls, both current and for the immediate future.
So Roxy, the question that was asked, was it explained what program they were applying through?
The stimulus funds. They receive stimulus funds and they will apply next week. And Ron's on here, so he may be able to provide a few more questions.
Okay. Well, there's provisions that are specially available. I'm looking at Ron's question. I'm getting better at this. I pulled up the text.
Yeah.
Right?
And we can actually, let's go ahead and unmute Ron.
Okay, sure. Hello, Ron.
Hi, Senator Young. How are you?
Yeah, I'm quite good, all things considered, trying to help folks, and would love to be helpful to you and all you represent. So what say you, sir?
Well, I just got a call from our city attorney. We're going to apply for something for the stimulus funds for the city on Monday. He said there was a portal we open once council approves it. And there's about a 48-hour turnaround where you have to finish the application. So, but he didn't tell me what that was. It was something from the CARES Act for political subdivisions.
Well, I just announced funding in the sum of $96,523,889 to Indiana airports. I would think 96 million would go pretty far, and that is dispersed to 65 separate Hoosier airports. All right.
Yes, I want to understand. We're getting, I think, 30,000 at our little airport.
Okay.
This is for the city operations.
Okay. All right. Well, the idea is just to keep you running in the near term, knowing there's going to be a real reduction in travel for a number of weeks still. There's also provision for larger cities, which Richmond falls under the threshold of population. But just so you know, in Indianapolis with their large population, and New York City, because of just the scale and scope of services they're having to provide in those more high infection, high community infection rate areas. That said, we know that Richmond and frankly, our small towns are also incurring costs they don't typically incur, and there's very little revenue coming in compared to typical times. So that's why the Federal Reserve has come up with a mechanism working with Treasury to provide loans to help you bridge this gap between now and the end of the virus. And so that's another mechanism available. And there may be something else that your city attorney was referring to. If so, I'm happy to help you navigate it and so forth. We have not yet advocated for a particular town or city to receive funds. Look, I want Indiana to get all the resources we need for help. So, we can work with your attorney and try and navigate this together.
So it's my understanding, Ron, I was on a call earlier today, and yes, the funds that came in for the airport specifically were the FAA funds, but that the city will be applying for the Main Street program through the Federal Reserve. And so that's my understanding.
Okay.
I think there's some confusion.
If he has more information, I'll put a chat back in here.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So that
Thanks,
Main
Ron.
Street program I talked about the larger businesses. There's a subset of those larger businesses. Think of them as the mid-sized businesses, right? That fall above the 500 threshold for Paycheck Protection Program and EIDL, but all the way up to 10,000. And this program, again, operated through Treasury, provides loans from all kinds of lenders to not-for-profits and businesses, and in this case, your town, evidently. Yeah, your city, I'm sorry.
So I will say, I think there's been some confusion in regard to the name of that program being called Main Street. You know, when people think of Main Street, they think of your small businesses, your locally owned restaurants and retail, and also think of that flowing through the Office of Community and Rural Affairs, et cetera. And with that being called Main Street, I think initially, just at first glance, people are misconstruing what the actual intent is for that program.
I have to admit, when I saw that, I thought that would create some confusion. You know, most states don't have a Main Street program through their Office of Community and Rural Affairs to revitalize areas and so forth. So that's one thing. But the other thing I looked at when I saw that, I was like, it's a Washington, D.C. euphemism. You know, it's to guard against anyone alleging that we're bailing out larger businesses. So call it a Main Street program, right? But it is confusing. I agree.
Yeah.
And sir, actually all businesses can apply up to 10,000 people.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And even if you have a PPP program, a loan, you can apply to the Main Street lending. So it's kind of targeted at 5,000 to 10,000, 500 to 10,000, but people under 500 can apply.
And why, Ann, would someone choose to do that? Just because you want more discretion, more flexibility to use those funds outside of the forgivable loan context, presumably, right?
Right, and it's a true loan, so that I think more funds would be available. It's a 4-year term, no payments for 1 year. It's a low interest rate. There's a spread based on SOFR, but you might get your forgivable PPP portion, but need additional liquidity, and that's what that program helps with as well.
Great.
So we don't, just to close out this this question as it relates to assisting municipalities, we don't have any visibility into applications that come in for a municipal lending facility that's been stood up by the federal government. It's
Okay.
just not something that we have visibility. It's an administrative matter. Yes.
All right, Roxy, do we have another question?
Yes, we have received one, and this is one we've had a couple of different times. What help is being planned for nonprofits, both 501c3s and 501c6s, that are struggling due to coronavirus?
Well, the 501c3s were already covered through the CARES Act. The sixes, and I would say the sixes have done a great job of I don't know whether it's an email chain or whatever, but every time I get on a teleconference, I appreciate you. It just wasn't in the bill. And so the question is, you know, is that going to be changed? It would have to be changed statutorily, and that may happen. That may well happen. To the extent there's any sort of partisan resistance to that, we'll see. I mean, I'm open to that conversation. I've heard it enough. I know it's important to a lot of Hoosiers. I value what our chambers and others do, and we'll have that conversation after May 4th, which is when we return, because there won't be universal agreement, since 501c6s aren't tax-paying entities, and I know 501c3s aren't either. Right.
Sure. Yeah, that is definitely, I mean, obviously chambers are 501c6s. We do definitely care about the opportunity to receive some of that assistance as well. Although some of the larger chamber, state and the U.S. chamber are lobbyists, most of us are not. Most of us are, you know, boots on the ground helping our small businesses survive. So, and mid-sized businesses. So we would love to see that. I will also throw in a plug for the convention and tourism bureaus that are also C6s. They receive their funding in large part, as you know, through hospitality which has come to a screeching halt in regard to restaurants and hotels. And so we've definitely heard from that industry that it will be important that the convention and tourism bureaus are able to hit the ground running and help this industry launch forward coming out of this as well. So I don't know if Mary is on the call or not, Mary Walker.
She is.
So Mary, if there's anything additional that you want to say on that regard, feel free to raise your hand and we'll get to you. Another question that we've had, Senator, is in regard to the additional $600 per week dollars that are coming to those that are receiving unemployment. As you know, here in the state of Indiana, especially in our region where we're not in one of the larger cities, when you take $400 a week that they would max out at for the unemployment and then add another 600 to get to the $1,000 a week, some of them are making more money on unemployment than they were when they were working. And so the concern, as you know, will be, and already is in part with our businesses, what's the incentive going to be for these individuals to go back to work?
Yeah, I share that concern, and I vocalized that as we were, as this bill came to the floor in the final hours of before passage of the vote. I'll just very quickly, because people may not like the provision, and I'm not in love with it either, right? I would not have come up with a $600 plus up for the state of Indiana had I designed this, but here was the challenge that our negotiators tell us they faced. New York, $600, okay, may make some sense. Los Angeles may make some sense. Schumer, Pelosi, but it makes very little sense in any of Indiana, probably, but certainly most of Indiana. So why do we do this? Well, I'm told it would have taken 6 to 8 months to reprogram the legacy unemployment insurance computer systems. And there are 50 different systems around the state that, are administered through state authorities. And to come up with a kind of a targeted program would require a reprogram of those systems. If instead you just chose a flat $600 one-size-fits-all plus up, we were told administratively this emergency unemployment insurance provision could be implemented, albeit very sort of ham-handed in its construction. And so that's how it came about, and none of us like it, unless I guess you're from one of these more generous states, or a recipient who benefits. I do think, as I've talked to a number of business people, I think the temptation to take this will, of course, be taken and is being taken by some, but I think that will be tempered heavily by the economic carnage people see around them. People out of work, people anxious about the future, uncertain about their employer's future, wanting to stay attached to their employer if they have a good job, right? Knowing there will be other people who swoop in and maybe gladly take that job in the back end once we emerge from this. So I think it'll be tempered by that. I hope it's not reauthorized after the end of July, and that's all I can really say about that. I guess the other thing I can say, which is in the state's hands, not the federal government's hands, is because these are administered at the state level, it will be up to the state to come up with mechanisms to ensure that, if they like, to ensure that the reason people are on unemployment insurance isn't because they were separated or because they have COVID-19 symptoms or taking care of somebody who has COVID-19 symptoms. right? Those are the reasons one can be eligible for this unemployment insurance. If somebody's just on this emergency pandemic UI because they can get more money out of it, so they quit their job, that's not the law doesn't allow for that, right? So we'll see whether the state scrutinizes that and what mechanisms they might come up with to make that happen.
Sure.
So there's a full picture with full realization, Melissa and the others on this call, that we may be headed for some challenges.
Sure.
We
Do we have another question, Roxy?
Yeah, we had a question come in about, on the end of this, what does the rollout for businesses to start to reopen, or is there any discussion on what that may look like?
Well, I want to address Sayward Salazar and his disappointment that anyone would think people would rather stay home and collect a check than go to work. I think it's a fair point, Mr. Salazar. I do think I give people credit for responding to incentives, though, and if they need to take care of their family and have some past due bills and maybe find themselves in the crisis of the moment and want to take care of their loved ones, this could all lead to some very difficult choices. And I think it's unfortunate that our policies put our rank and file workers who typically do want to be worked because it gives dignity to their life. We shouldn't put them in a position where they have to make these really odd choices, and it puts our employers in a bad position too, because of course we want all our workers to go back to viable businesses. So thank you for the question, Salazar. Yes, I'm sorry, I jumped the gun.
No, great. Thank you for that comment. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Roxy?
So, yeah, so the question that I had was, is there any conversations happening on your end about what the rollout of the end of this? How will it just be like a floodgates open, we're all back in our stores and shopping and eating out, or will it be a gradual process? Do we know what that looks like?
We don't know exactly yet. I wish I could give you a clear-cut answer, a date certain in which we return to work, and a lot of visibility on what that looks like. I can articulate a process that's going to get us there. And so I think the president has done the right thing by constituting a group, a separate open up the country sort of op plan. Our governor has done the same thing at the state level. It's composed of representatives from business people and those who understand different sectors of our economy. And what I anticipate these groups doing, although I'm not in a position to speak for them, but they're going to go, and once we have enough testing information to get a better understanding of the virus, how quickly it's spreading across different geographies, the risk of a second wave of spread in the fall, which is still an open question, whether certain individuals, a large segment of Americans is resistant to the virus. We'll have visibility on all these things, I hope, in coming weeks based on all the testing that is being manufactured and distributed and procured and distributed. Once you get visibility onto that, you can develop protocols about going back to work, start to socialize those and communicate those. They'll probably vary across different types of businesses. And then I don't know whether the rollout will be kind of a big bang rollout, or if instead it will be more gradual. That's unclear to me. But that's the process by which all of this I expect is going to be done. It will be a risk-based approach where you treat New York City different than you do Richmond, Indiana.
Thank you.
Yes.
So just to elaborate on that, what are your thoughts in regard to some of the banter, if you will, between the authority of the president in Washington to determine when the opening of the floodgates are, so to speak, as Roxy said, versus that being up to the individual states. What, can you clarify that for us a little bit? Does that belong
I'll do my
that
best.
belong to the president, or does that belong to Governor Holcomb?
So Governor Holcomb was clearly within, the scope of his legal authority to issue his stay-at-home order, their guidance as it relates to social distancing and so forth. The federal government is within its authorities to issue guidelines, right? Those are different things, of course. One would hope that, your governors are going to work well with the federal authorities, and you can reconcile the two. We happen to have a governor, and this is most governors where there is a coordination, and they're able to reconcile the two. And my expectation would be that there will continue to be coordination and collaboration, even in those states or regions where we see some public back and forth between the governors and the administration, because let's be clear, this has never been litigated in a court of law. This is a very unique situation.
Sure.
But even in those states, you have the distribution of funds to those impacted states in response to the needs as communicated by the governor's office and others. So they're working together, and we'll get through this thing. Yeah. But it's a federalist system, and this is we have in some areas a sharing of power, some areas very distinct powers, and this is an unprecedented. Now, that word has been used so many times, it's almost starting to sound like a catchword, but it really is. And so we're all trying to do our best to find our feel our way through it.
I think, do we have another question, Roxy?
Let's see. So Eric Eastman is asking if there is the lack of medical expertise, and we also had a question about lack of test supplies.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know that they're done in terms of naming members to that commission. So I think there are going to be a lot of working groups. My expectation would be there'd be a lot of working groups and a lot of consultation with other folks on an as-needed basis for that group. But again, this is a unique situation. It's unclear exactly whether you need embedded within that group the medical expertise, or if there can be interface between that distinct group and the coronavirus task force at the federal level. I don't know how our governor is going to handle it as well. That's his discretion. But I think there was a lack of representation from some of our business leaders and some of our critical infrastructure leaders who understand these things. They understand what it means to close down flights from an airport and allow some flights in and not others, and what that does to the whole business model, which I don't understand. And so you need this cross-cutting representation. There was already public health representation on the coronavirus task force. If there's not an interface between those two groups, I'd be very surprised.
So one thing I want to move to, and I know you may or may not be able to answer this because some of it is a state level, but in regard to the opening last Friday of unemployment for self-employed and contract workers, first of all, that was outstanding for some of our local small businesses. That said, I've heard that several folks have gone on to apply for unemployment during the last few days, and it is so overloaded right now that they're having trouble even getting the system to open up for that application to happen. Do you see that just evening out over the next days or weeks, and that will be able to take place. Do you have any comments on that? Again, I know that state.
We're reaching unemployment levels that, I mean, we have not seen in generations, right? Just weeks after we were at the best economy by some characterizations in 50 years. So, I mean, it's been a massive increase in workflow. The Department of Workforce Development has already trained new workers to help process these applications. So I'm not in state government. I'm not a state government leader, but I really do commend the governor and his administration for staffing up, for training individuals, and they're beginning to really get their hands dirty and process these applications, however they do that. And I heard, because I was with the governor yesterday at a press conference answering some federal questions, and the head of the Department of Workforce Development had an opportunity to come up and explain some of these things. So I would suggest, I know they have a hotline at the state level where you can receive answers to state questions. So if you have further questions pertaining to the administration of the UI program, I suspect they would be able to give you some more visibility into it, unless there's anything else that Jamie Light has. Jamie's on this teleconference with us as well, and she does deal with the federal aspect of UI for our office. Jamie?
Yeah, so I would say, we're hoping to have things up and running within the next few weeks. At least that's what the state has told us. This is a population of folks who traditionally are not eligible. So I think there was a lot of guidance that was needed from the Department of Labor to states to try and figure this out, as well as what the senator talked about with systems. Like, usually this sort of system was a very manual process because it was mainly for disasters. So to try and put this, having so many people apply at once, it's taking the state a little bit of time to have their systems, get up and running.
Well, we will just continue to encourage those folks to be patient, but not to give up. I had heard that there had been a couple that had gotten through and they were declined because they hadn't paid into unemployment, just because of the system, as you mentioned, Jamie. So I will just encourage them to follow up on that. I want to be respectful of your time. I am looking to see if there are other. Roxy, do you have any other questions that we haven't gotten to at this point?
I think that answers all of them.
Well, I'm happy to just sort of close her out here.
Yes, if you would, that'd be great.
Melissa, Roxy, and everyone, I thank you again for this opportunity. We're here to be of service to you. We're working 7 days a week, responding to emails. If you get our voicemail, we've been very busy. We will respond to your phone calls. I'll continue to do these teleconferences. I enjoy doing these quite a bit, and in conference calls and being as accessible as I personally can. But we've got a great team of individuals, and they not only sort of work for me, they definitely work for all of you. And I would just say, I'm proud of what we've done in a nonpartisan fashion. We're really focused on trying to help get beyond this so everyone can get back to work, which is what they want to do. We can get this economy moving again. And maybe on the back end of this, we'll be even stronger. I actually believe we will. Not only have we learned to use technology a little more effectively, and that will certainly be a force multiplier for how we do business and how we learn and how we provide medical attention to the underserved. But I think there's a heightened awareness among most of us that, even those of us who have the benefit of being surrounded by family, that we miss one another. In a time of divided politics, a time when there's a geographic divide, there are socioeconomic divides in our country, and much has been made and said of all that, and there's a lot of accuracy to those things. But people are beginning to miss one another and miss people that aren't just like them. And so let's come out of this sort of resolving to, take this very difficult, challenging national situation and be a stronger nation on account of it. So thanks a bunch for giving me an opportunity to say a few words at the end. And don't hesitate to look at our website, young.senate.gov/coronavirus, where we have a toolkit of information that will help small businesses and others navigate this difficult environment.
We appreciate that. And I just want to say, on behalf of the chamber and the businesses here locally, thank you for the quick work that you all did. As you said, bipartisan passing of such large bills and relief packages it's unheard of. And so to be able to see that happening, and not only that, but the transparency that you all have given from the national level, working with our governor Holcomb, and appreciate him and his transparency. I watch his press conference every day. Saw you there yesterday, but just the transparency it's been pleasant. So as difficult as all of this has been, it's been pleasant that some of these lines of communication just seem to be really strong right now. So we appreciate that. Appreciate your time today. If there's anything we can do for your office or help disseminate information, please let us know. Thank you, and thanks to all of your team as well.
Stay healthy, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.